but there's a few people who couldn't attend, so we'd like to make it available afterwards. Great. I will then hand over to, sorry, I didn't even introduce the speakers. This evening we have Jane Thurlow from the Cherwell Collective, which is one of many community action groups and doing amazing work in all different strands, some of which Jane will talk about this evening. And we also have Vicky Baker from Oxfordshire Community and Voluntary Action, who's going to talk to us more about the kind of partner funder perspective later. Fantastic. Jane, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo, and welcome everybody. Great to see you this evening. I hope everybody is keeping warm because it feels a bit colder tonight, doesn't it? I've got 2 layers of jumpers on, keeping nice and cozy here. So I'm just gonna share my screen as well. Great. So can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so just a bit of an introduction to me to start with and the organisation. So yeah, thanks for the intro, Jo. My name's Jane, and I'm the evaluation lead at the Cherwell Collective. In terms of the organisation, we are a collective which supports the community with infrastructure to help them reduce their waste. And the aim is to build a circular economy locally. And you can see the various different programs there. So we've got the Cherwell Larder, which redistributes food surplus. The Waste Innovation Station, or WISH, which empowers people to repurpose, reuse and repair household waste. The Oxford Party Library, reducing waste through lending party supplies. Harvest at Home, that reduces consumption and increases food security and teaches people to garden at home. And the Climatarian Kitchen, that reduces waste by using local food surplus to provide meals for the community, and also educating people about the carbon cost of food. We're also part of a broader partnership, and CAG is one of the partners in that partnership as well, the broader WISH partnership, so the Waste Innovation Station partnership. And this diagram actually shows you a little bit about our theory of change and how the partners fit together. And I'm going to talk about how the evaluation connects with the theory of change and how we've learned from what we've the data we've collected and the various activities that we've done over the pilot stage of the WISH partnership, and how that's fed into changes in the way that we approach what we do. But you can see that we've got on the left-hand side what we would call kind of motivating or reinforcing factors. So increasing connection to other people, so increasing social connection and increasing connection to nature. And then on the right-hand side, really the facilitation of wanted behaviours, so decreasing waste and decreasing consumption. And the partnership operates across those different areas and in a kind of holistic way. So a bit more about that when we talk about what we've learned and why we've built up the partnership in the way that we have done. But I wanted to introduce you to our evaluation framework. So you can see there right at the top, in terms of what we're hoping to do, we're ensuring through the framework that we actually learn from our community, and what we learn from them actually shapes what we do, and that in turn facilitates the development of the circular economy. So of course, evaluation is about partly about internal learning, and it's also about reporting, partners and funders. But we think the most important purpose of evaluation is really about listening to the community that participate in all of our programs and activities, so that they're actually the people that are informing what we do going forward. And in terms of what we develop, it's actually something that is fit for purpose in relation to their kind of wants and needs, and they're more likely to work with us to shape that circular economy locally. So in terms of the partnership, what we're aiming to do here is to enable partner leads and program leads to evaluate against the aims of projects and activities. So track progress against those aims and activities, and also ensure that everything that we do in terms of our development is actually evidence-based. So hopefully those of you are feeling a bit confused and bewildered, we can demonstrate that's actually something that's quite easy to do. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it's important to actually have evidence to inform decisions. And I think one of the things for, people like us who are quite passionate about the environment, sometimes we tend to mistake our own behavior and our own motivations for what other people might think and do. So it's really important to ground our decisions and what we're doing in evidence rather than necessarily in a hunch or in, our own motivations. And that's something that I think I'm certainly, have been kind of prone to do, and think about the environment and all the things that I want to achieve, but actually bringing it back to the evidence and really assessing what's working and what's not working and how we can improve is really important. And the framework is actually modular. So we've got these different levels. And the idea behind that is that you can actually select the level of evaluation based on the size of your activity and the resources that you have available to you. So, for example, a one-off 30-minute talk on sustainability would be evaluated at a lower level than a 3-month series of activities that was actually aimed at, for example, teaching people how to grow trees or how to grow vegetables, something that's more about a kind of longer term outcome. So it's flexible in that sense. And you can see the different levels from basic monitoring through engagement to learning to behavior. So I'm just going to take you through those levels quickly now. So level 1 to 2 is really about basic monitoring. So you can use this level to measure what you're delivering. So for example, you might want to measure the quantity of waste diverted from landfill, the number of items repaired, the number of trees planted, or the number of people trained, those sorts of things, depending on what the focus of your program is. And also measure who you're engaging. So that might actually just be a simple count of the number of people attending an event or an activity. But equally important to actually understand who you're not engaging. So for example, if you're collecting postcodes or basic demographic data, you can actually identify specific locations or groups of people who aren't engaging with you, which is really useful for outreach and targeting. In terms of tools, you can see on the right-hand side there just a list of tools that can help in terms of the different levels. So for level 1 and 2, you're definitely going to want some form of spreadsheet to collate those numbers in terms of people and in terms of deliverables. We use basic feedback forms as well on things like demographics for this level, which are recorded by people at the event. And then you could introduce some quick questions on themes related to waste, and more on that in a second. I'll show you how we run some very basic but very interactive active evaluation activities that we can get quite good feedback on, some simple questions at this basic level of monitoring. The next level is around engagement. So here we really want to understand whether participants are satisfied with the experience that they've had and also engaged with the activities. We also would like to know how we can improve what we do in the future. So, for example, a very simple question which asks people what they would like to be seen done differently in the future can help you learn from them about how you can improve. So for that, again, we'd use slightly more sophisticated. When I say sophisticated, we're sort of talking maybe 4 or 5 questions on a feedback form, which can either be available on a tablet, or sometimes if we're doing something outdoors, we actually do, we don't like to, but we do have printed copies of feedback forms. Again, quick questions on themes, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And testimonials as well. So that can actually be collected through feedback forms, but you know, an endorsement, somebody talking about what they enjoyed, why they enjoyed it, or what they didn't enjoy, equally can help guide your feedback, and also really useful evidence in terms of feedback to partners and funders. The next level up from there is level 4 to 5 is learning. So here we're really trying to tease out, are people learning from our programs and activities? We want to know whether we're influencing people's knowledge, their skills, or their attitudes in relation to waste. For this level, we've actually used interviews, which sounds maybe a little, you know, overwhelming, but a simple discussion guide with, again, 4 or 5 questions, but really digging into what people have learned and whether they're likely to take any of that learning into their own lives. So digging into their knowledge, their skills, and how they've learned through the process of your program or activity. You could do that through a survey as well. So maybe a post-activity survey. Again, very simple, you know, 4 or 5 questions that you can collect some data on learnings. And then finally, level 6, really beginning to think about behaviour. So are people behaving differently as a result of our programme or partnership? And I'll take you through some of the methods that we've used over the course of the WISH pilot to measure behaviour. Some very straightforward, some a little bit more complex, and I think you can mix and match some of those methods to really try to get at what's going on with people's behaviour. So I'm just going to walk you through quickly some examples of evaluations that we've done over the course of the last year. In April of this year, we ran a clothes swap, and that was encouraging people to come in with clothes that they no longer wanted and swap them for an item or items that they did. Really popular with our community. And the evaluation team recorded attendance with basic demographics. We also weighed clothes in to the event, and we weighed clothes out, and we use that as a measurement in terms of the weight of clothing saved from landfill. And then we set up a small evaluation point at the exit where a volunteer actually encouraged people to participate in evaluation activities. So we had a simple Google form for feedback to measure engagement with the event and ideas on how to improve, and that was set up on a laptop. And then we had a interactive activity where we had a poster asking people what advice or support they wanted to help them reduce their waste, and then 3 responses. And we had 3 jam jars with labels on the 3 jam jars with the 3 responses. And then we gave each person a bead and asked them to put the bead into the jam jar that corresponded to their answer. Very simple, a survey, but really interactive. And what we found is that people are much more willing to participate in the evaluation if it's something like that than, you know, a complicated or, you know, written survey. So actually kind of mixing and matching some of the approaches can be really helpful. And you have some really good conversations as well with people about their habits and, you know, what they think about waste in the process. Another example, we ran a wellbeing fair in May of this year, and that was the next level up. And it was very similar to the evaluation activities for the clothes swap. Obviously, we didn't weigh in clothes or weigh out clothes. But we did extend the evaluation with short interviews. So again, 4 or 5 questions to understand whether people would do anything differently as a result of what they'd learned. at the fair. And in relatively short period of time, 5 minutes, we gathered a lot of quite deep information that was really, really useful in terms of our impact, but also in terms of how we could improve those kind of events in the future. And finally, the WISH pilot. So this was the Waste Innovation Station pilot, and we ran that for 18 months. So it's quite a long period. And when you're thinking about behavior change, it's good to think about collecting data at the beginning, so before the program or the project has actually launched, to give you a baseline, and then at the end. At the end of the program or project, to actually measure the difference. So asking the same questions at the beginning and the same at the end, but measuring the difference over time. So with the WISH survey, we actually did the beginning, the middle, and the end point of the pilot because it was quite a long period. And we included key measures on health, well-being, connection to nature, and attitudes and behaviours to waste. And thinking back to the first slide, really trying to test some of those ideas that we had about connection to nature and connection to other people in the community and what impact that might have on people's attitudes and behaviours around waste, which is why we had those measures in the survey. We had about 20 participants who we followed over the course of a year. And again, we did interviews with them at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of the pilot. And we created impact stories, which really looked at how people had made changes in their lives relating to waste and other things which were unintended kind of impacts of the program as well. And you can see there Hannah's journey. We brought those to life in impact stories, which complemented the data from the survey. And this year, actually, what we're planning to do is to start to think about participants self-recording their behaviour. So we're going to ask people to share photos of repurposed items. We may ask people to actually take photos of their waste, so that we can understand what they're throwing away and how that changes over time, and to kind of self-record, so to count and weigh items that they're saving from landfill and use that as a measurement over time. So complementing the surveys and the interviews with some what would be called probably observational research, but asking people to self-record their behaviour. So as Jo said, well, evaluation isn't much good if it just sits in a big dusty report on the shelf. It really needs to be used. So the real value in evaluation is using your findings to refine what you're doing, and to, when you've made a mistake, actually, changing direction. We did well in terms of the number of people that participated in our evaluation. So in the end, we had about 1,500 people over the course of 18 months who participated in the evaluation. And I've just got a few examples of where we learned things and what we did with the learning. So you can see here some feedback that we received on infrastructure. So we were very interested in understanding what kinds of services and infrastructure people wanted locally to improve their waste reduction efforts. And one of the things that came back was the reduction in packaging and the kind of annoyance at having to buy goods that are packaged. It was something that really unified people, and not just the people who were really super passionate about the environment, also the people that were quite disengaged, but it was a real kind of unifier for people. We also discovered that people really wanted to think about how to repair items, particularly electrical items. And there was some quite a lot of points around how to recycle items, and how to overcome barriers, like you do have a pickup service for larger items, but there's a cost attached to that, and that was a real barrier for people who were financially more strapped. So people were looking for things like free pickup services for larger items, particularly people who didn't have access to a car. So it was disadvantaging people who were financially more strapped than others to recycle items and in a responsible way. So we used everything that we've learned from the results of our polling and our interviews to really inform the kind of outreach and communication that we do going forward. And we're also using it to inform the work that we do with local retailers and the local council in terms of services and infrastructure that people like, so that we can use the results to advocate for better pathways for people to reduce their waste. Big learning around connection to nature. So we did confirm a relationship between connectedness to nature and responsible and ethical shopping decisions. So we've used that to guide our theory of change around how to impact behaviours at home. So really focusing on connecting people to nature in activities, and with the understanding that that translates to concern for the environment and a willingness to reduce waste and shop responsibly. And another big learning around social connection. So in the survey, we actually had some measures around well-being. So on the left-hand side, you've got these WebMS kind of pie charts. So that's a standard well-being measure that's used. And we track that over the period of the pilot. And we also track people's personal barriers to taking environmental action. And you can see that on the right-hand side. And what we found is that actually climate agency improves well-being over time. So the more people feel that they are having an impact on the environment, the greater their kind of well-being measures improve. And you can see that in the orange and the red on the pie charts over time getting bigger over the pilot. So we've used that in terms of looking for partners very specifically that will really kind of forge that connection for people with nature. And also in terms of the previous chart, yes, so sorry, the connection to nature. We've looked at thinking about locations where we actually identified particular opportunities around gaps that we might have. So thinking back to those kind of demographic kind of statistics that I was talking about earlier, just where are the gaps? Where might we actually think about expanding and you know, expanding our kind of partnership in the future? So that's really, hopefully, if there's one thing that you guys take away from our talk today, I think just thinking about, you know, how you can use evaluation, continue to be curious, and build it into how you develop your program going forward.
Amazing.
So,
thank you, Jane.
I can see a couple of hands up. Should we take a few questions before we go on to the next activity?
Yeah, absolutely.
Laura.
It was actually the clapping reaction
Oh,
emoji.
the clapping. Okay.
Really a question.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
I might have some questions at the end. I mean, actually, I'd love to have a catch up with you at some point, Jane, just to talk particularly about those well-being questionnaires, because Vicky's probably going to talk a little bit about that when she comes to do a talk. But yeah, it'd be really good to just have some time at some point to talk a bit about that, and just yeah, just sort of yeah, that challenge really around kind of, you know, that need and knowledge to get the data and get the evidence, but making sure that it's proportionate and meaningful, and that people that are being asked the questions know why they're being asked the questions and how it relates to the activities that they're engaging in as well. But brilliant presentation. I was like, oh, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, definitely good to catch up. at a later date, and that would be really helpful for me as well. Anne.
Thank you. I never cease to be impressed the scale of what Cherwell Collective does. I mean, it's quite amazing, really, the number of people that you manage to reach out to. So on the back of that, I mean, it's a huge task for you to do all this monitoring. So 2 questions. First of all, are a lot of people like yourself involved in all of that and collating all the data? But also, it was a question specifically about demographics and how those are measured. And do people sort of self-declare? You mentioned postcodes, which was one thing, but demographics obviously it covers a whole range of different elements, and it's a difficult one to gather unless people are self-declaring it.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Anne. 2 great questions. Just in terms of the question about number of people, because I think it is a really important question around how many people do you need to do some of this stuff. So we have well, we have me as a paid member of staff, and we have a number of volunteers. So we've got some great volunteers who have a real interest both in the sort of data side and in the people-facing side. So people who enjoy running evaluation activities, so some of those more interactive activities that we talked about, and people who really enjoy sitting with a spreadsheet and inputting data. So we've been lucky and fortunate in that, but I think that those are people that we've just recruited really through the wider Cherwell Collective volunteer bank, and we've just really played to their strengths. So I think you definitely need somebody who can build out the framework and can think about what the data is telling you. Obviously, designing some of the more complicated methodologies like the long-term longitudinal survey, you may need some support and help to do that. But in terms of actually, particularly really level 1, 2, 3, and 4, collation of data can be done by volunteers, and it can be really simple and quite automated. So as I described, in fact, some of those kind of what we call quick and dirty questions, the little beads and bowls with simple questions that people can respond to, we're actually taking that one step further to make them unmanned. So the idea of when you go to Tesco or you go to Waitrose, you get a token and you put the token in a jar for the charity that you want to support. So really just making those kinds of activities something that people can do themselves. So they participate in a close swap, we give them the token and off they go and they pop it in a jar. So some of the activities can be quite low, what's the word, not too resource hungry. So yeah, we don't have a big evaluation team actually. So we're lucky in that our kind of managing director is very data literate. So that helps. But I think really using the resources that you have and using the volunteers you have to run the evaluation activities and building that. The question on demographics, so it is self-declaring. So in our surveys, we ask people a number of questions where they select specific categories in terms of demographics. So we ask them to self-identify in that sense. And as you said, it's a really sensitive area and you need to be careful about how you're collating that data and how you're storing that data as well. We're not touching on data protection, I think, today, but it is a really important part of evaluation as well.
Indeed. Thank
Sarah.
you very much. Yes.
Thanks, Anne. Sarah.
Thank you so much for this. presentation so far. A couple of questions, and I'm sorry if I might have missed it as I joined a bit late. I can see from your website that you're linking with the Kidlington Parish Council and then also with the wider North Oxfordshire. How does some of the findings that you find go on to help decision making within the council or the wider kind of county? You know, because one of the things that we're trying to do in Greener Henley is we're very much at the beginning of kind of data collection, as well as you know, it's putting on activities and events for our local community. And one of the thoughts I had as you were sharing is that we've got a table at one of these Christmas markets, you know, that are for anyone. It's called a Kindness Christmas fair, so it's a really intentional thing to be, you know, how to purchase with a more sustainable perspective. And I was just thinking, you know, maybe there's one of those little jar things that we could do that could gather feedback. So it's not necessarily a specific activity that we're running, but, you know, gathering feedback is a helpful thing. I think it's just, how do you decide the question to ask? That could be quite a difficult thing. Like, how do you go about trying to decide, you know, what things to focus on or what questions? Sorry, a couple of questions in there, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great question, Sarah. So in terms of how we use kind of evaluation to inform our work with local government, one of the things that actually we are trying to do is to look at measuring specific kind of data on waste in our district in comparison to other districts. So we're trying to develop some metrics with kind of local government that are standardized that we can use to do that. We haven't quite achieved that yet, but I think in terms of thinking about kind of what, you know, I guess what often kind of local government are interested in is how we're doing, you know, like how are we doing compared to other people. So we're hoping to be able to work with them to develop those metrics and then to be able to facilitate measurement around waste and waste infrastructure around different localities. So that would be one thing. We have used some of our findings in relation to waste reduction, specifically around composting. This was actually slightly before my time. My understanding is that we used some early evaluation findings to facilitate local composting sites, shared composting sites in shared areas around the district, so that people, you know, who didn't have access to a kind of site to compost green waste could use shared composting sites and shared composting bins. So both using it to facilitate ideas and work with the local government to put those kind of ideas into place, but also supporting in terms of measurement and thinking with kind of local government about how we can kind of work constructively together to measure waste reduction and success against those aims, because they are obviously collective aims for government, for community organisations, for in some cases local businesses as well. In terms of deciding how to deciding on the questions, yes, very difficult when you start with a blank sheet of paper. I think always start with your objectives. So that can really help you focus on what you're trying to measure. So if you know what your aims are and you know what your outcomes are that are going to help support the delivery of your aims, you can measure against those. So, you know, if your outcomes are around increasing knowledge around a very sort of specific area, then you can design questions around what people might want to know So it might be a question about how can we support you? And then you have sort of 3 responses thinking about the sorts of support that you might be able to provide. If it's something that you want to maybe do more around the kind of impact of your programs, you can ask some questions about, whether people are likely to do X, Y, and Z as a result of participating in the activity that day. So, for example, in the well-being, I think the well-being event that we had some specific stalls around kind of meditation, around nature, and around getting involved in gardening, and around activity and kind of mindful activity. And we had a very simple jam jar exercise, which asked people whether they were likely to do things to connect to nature, to participate in shared activities with others, or the other kind of response. So whether they were likely to actually do that as a result of what they'd learned during the wellbeing fair. So that's a very simple way of measuring impact. And I think just, yes, keep it simple. Just keep it really simple. So think about your aims and think about your outcomes, and either what people need or what you've delivered, measuring what they might go on and do, what they've learned. Yeah. But we probably need a whole nother workshop on theory of change, because I think having a really good theory of change can really help in terms of monitoring and evaluation, because then you have a really clear idea of what you're trying to achieve, and then your kind of evaluation questions flow very naturally from your theory of change. But see, we've only got an hour and a half.
Great, thanks, Sarah and Jane. Sam has put in the chat that there's clearly some research expertise. You were saying, Jane, that Emily is quite data savvy, involved in the organisation. So Sam's question is, what would be your one piece of simple advice for groups that perhaps don't have a research savvy person?
I think keep it simple. So I think look at those levels, and don't get overwhelmed. Don't try and run before you can walk, because actually using those very simple measures in level 1 and level 2 and level 3 and level 4, which is around engagement, and I think if you're able to capture some simple testimonials as well. So if you're measuring your demographics, you're measuring your deliverables, what you've actually delivered in terms of numbers of things, or weight, or whatever it is in terms of the metric that you're trying to measure. And you're measuring people's engagement, and you're measuring their ideas of what they want and how you can improve. And you've got some good sort of small kind of testimonials about what people have taken from their kind of involvement with you. That is really good evaluation, for a community organisation, and I would be very happy with that. So I think it is keep it simple, and start with those early levels. You can, and something that, not actually at the Cherwell Collective, but I have done in the past, is actually put out, volunteer recruitment for people that maybe have a background in market research or research, because you don't know who's out there, and you may actually be able to find somebody who has time in the evenings, for example. They might be retired, but they've got great knowledge that they'd like to apply and use to help. So that's another thing to think about, is it could be volunteer knowledge that you're tapping into, and asking for somebody that might have data skills, or might have market research knowledge, or whatever it might be. You could think about that as well.
Great, thanks, Jane. if there's no more questions at the moment, then Jane, do you want to just give people a steer as to what they might talk about in a breakout, and we can perhaps do breakout 10 minutes?
Yeah, definitely. So we thought it would be great also to break up the listening and do a bit of talking yourselves. So the question to respond to in your groups, have a discussion, and then maybe nominate one person to share your thoughts and feedback. But thinking about what you've heard, what data would you collect to map against your project goal? So thinking about the framework and what you've heard, what data would you collect to map against your own project goal?
Right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had good discussions. Jane, should we hear back from someone from each group just very briefly?
Yeah, I think that would be really good, just to have a couple of minutes feedback from each group.
Fantastic. Anyone want to raise their hand or speak for their group?
I can go first for our group.
Thanks, Catherine.
I didn't take notes and was assigned reporter outer at the very end, so I'll do my best to share from memory. But briefly, we were just talking about, Celia was saying, you know, for them, they collect a lot of data, and some of what sort of CAG asked for, doing everything measuring by weight, so they have some good metrics on that, but trying to think about the softer side of things. So where are people coming from, and how are they hearing about them? And so Celia was taken already by the thought of sort of the jam jars, putting sort of coins in jars or beads in jars or whatever that might be, to try and get better sort of data, if you will. And we're talking about how to use evaluation to gain a sort of shared understanding of why people are coming together, kind of what their purpose is. We talked about using jam boards where people are coming together in online forums. So to have just sort of like a standing jam board that people can pop sticky notes onto, and having 3 sort of simple questions that people can feed into over time. As well as then following that up with interviews to kind of get the nuance and the detail of feedback that people have. And again, keeping those very short, 3-4 questions, you know, trying to take up no more than 5 minutes of people's time, depending on what kind of information you're looking for. So, but sort of, yeah, looking at different kinds of tools that might complement each other. You're on mute, Joe.
Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I was just saying thank you to Catherine, and anyone from a different group want to say a few words?
Joe.
I can if you want. We were talking about the information you get at the end of an event. People might be like, yeah, I'll definitely go and do that. But if you have a repeat event, it could be really useful at the next one to go, well, did you? Rather than, are you intending to? And yeah, it's really useful if you have a repeat event to be able to do the same questions over time, so you can see what is changing. And then there was a lovely idea of capturing micro stories in that kind of little short conversations at the end, what somebody's done differently, and then those being really useful to engage other people and inspire other people, as well as for your own kind of evaluating purposes.
Great, thanks, Jo.
Nice.
Go for it, Sarah.
Thank you. So I just want to say thank you to the group, because we spent a lot of time on one of the things I was talking about. So I really appreciate the collective feedback. So group 3, I think it's reflecting back that some of the events that we run, that may be repeat events, as people have already said, you know, how it's just helped me think, how do we capture evaluation at those really simple events or activities, whether it's a talk, or a gathering. In this case, we were talking about you know, screening of environmental films at a local cinema, followed by a panel event. You know, how do we just capture people's reactions or feedback, whether it's the QR code flashed up on the screen that people get out their phones, or, you know, or again, really like your beads in a jam jar that people can simply do, and, you know, it's simple. So yeah, so just lots of food for thought. And then another person was talking about a new kind of retail space that they wanted to open up in the middle of Oxford, and how that can be inclusive and more accessible for anyone who isn't necessarily part of an existing environmental group. But then the time ran out, so we didn't get a chance to talk more, so sorry about that.
Right. Anne?
So could I just add to that? I was in the same group as Sarah as well. So it was interesting, the discussion about Sarah's events, the distinction, I think, between the sort of quantitative aspects of you know, a quick question and you're getting numbers, and you know, did you like it, didn't you, those sort of questions, with the more qualitative questions that you would like to dig into to really find out what people were thinking, and has it affected how they will act, is it affecting how they're thinking about things, and that's much more difficult to capture, particularly in the case of, you know, a very large audience at an event, to get people to actually think about that and to communicate that to you is quite a difficult one.
Definitely. Thanks, Anne. Laura, were you gonna?
Well, I think we were group 4, and there was only 2 of us in that one, and actually neither of us are from a CAG, so we're a bit sort of like kind of like bigger sort of like community sort of like infrastructure approach, but really we were talking about just trying to get a really good balance, which we thought came across really well in Jane's talk, between just thinking about your basics and what's achievable there on your basic demographics, and actually that even though that can be quite challenging, that you have to think sensitively about how to ask people that information and do it in different ways, that it's really valuable and it really helps you in like shaping good delivery of projects and future projects, and then just kind of keeping that balance of those numbers against your qualitative stuff, and just thinking creatively about that story collection of people's experiences, and not just always kind of just thinking that you're going to collect those positive interactions, but give people that honest open space to feedback what their experience has been. And we particularly liked the idea of focusing on measuring people's intentions on engagement and how their behavior might have been changed by doing that. And just 2 other reflections were that we thought it's really important not to change the goalposts in terms of your data collection if you can, but I think Vicky's going to talk a bit more about that in a minute, and also just thinking about so what on questions, and that when you're trying to devise questions, just trying to go through that process of the person that's going to answer it, you know, if they're being asked that question, are they going to think, why am I being asked that? What's the impact of being asked this question in terms of my engagement with it?
Great, thanks, Laura. That's really insightful. I just saw that Sam in the chat has said that they did walnuts in a plant pot to vote on the colour of a plaque at a tree planting event, which was people engaged with really well, found it fun and novel, and some people took the walnuts home to plant them, so double value. Thanks, Sam, that's great. I know I use buttons just because I happen to have loads of buttons instead of beads, so you can use all sorts of things. But I'm quite conscious of time, so I think we're going to swiftly move on to Vicky's presentation, so that we have time for any questions after that as well.
Right, okay, thank you. Thanks, Jo. So yeah, I'm Vicky Baker. I'm a Community Development Officer at Oxfordshire and Community Voluntary Action. also a very active trustee of a CAG. So yeah, it's interesting to be here tonight, and thank you to CAG and to Cherwell Collective for inviting us to come along. So I'm going to speak specifically about our learnings for a piece of work that we were involved in. It was a project called the Connected Communities Fund. We delivered it in partnership with another infrastructure organisation called Community First Oxfordshire, and it was a piece of work that was funded by Oxfordshire County Council. So the fund was £175,000 from the adult social care budget. It was really put in place to increase and strengthen the range of activities that are available to older people and adults with additional need across the county. So it was really seen that community groups, the activities arranged by them, and all the sort of community-led activities that go on in people's neighbourhoods was really a key component in delivery of the Oxfordshire Way. And that's the Oxfordshire Way in terms of Oxfordshire County Council's strategic vision of care across the county, not the 66-mile long path through the Oxfordshire countryside. So it was really based on this approach of putting people at the heart of what they do and building resilience within communities. So we were in the role of OCVA and Community First in this programme. I mean, we're not funders, that's not our role, but we were kind of these two organisations who really had this relationship with these grassroots organisations out across the county, this kind of understanding of local groups and local places and the things that go on there. So we were delivering this fund as something that we call a grants plus approach. So it wasn't just the financial support, it was also like community development support around that grant. So it wasn't just the financial alone. We recognised that there was a need, particularly amongst small organisations, to have that wider support. So yeah, we were there with our community development officers at both organisations to support those groups through the whole process, from the initial application all the way through, including all the evaluation and monitoring. So yeah, the fund was really about just increasing the range of activities available to older people so that they've had choices regarding the activities that they want to take part in their communities. So we received a huge range of applications from all different organisations across the whole county, and we funded 58 projects, so all sorts of activities from arts and crafts groups to exercise clubs and sports teams, theatre and music. So we were really keen with this fund to kind of break the mould in terms of kind of what might be traditionally viewed as services or activities for older people, and we can really recognise kind of the role of CAGs for challenging that stereotype, and we could really see demonstrated well how like ageing well and climate action could go hand in hand. We had things like repair cafes and community gardens, cook together, eat together events, and all these sorts of things that really kind of provided different opportunities for people to engage in activities that were meaningful to them. So we made awards from £210 up to a maximum of £5,000. So yeah, in terms of the evaluation and monitoring requirements for this programme, this was a new fund. This hadn't been done before. It was a new approach from the County Council. So I should probably say that this £175,000 sat alongside a larger 325 that was administered through the Community Foundation. So that was more of a traditional grants approach, but this was kind of doing things a little bit differently with a smaller pot of money, giving smaller grants to smaller groups. But we were really keen to really kind of evidence the change and demonstrate what this sort of funding could do for grassroots organisations. So in terms of demonstrating the impact, it was it was settled on a number of measures that Jane's already touched upon. So these standard measures of, well, the short Warwick-Edinburgh mental wellbeing scale was one of the measures that was decided upon for measuring well-being, and that sat along questions from the UCLA loneliness scale. Because this fund was looking at social isolation and looking at loneliness and ways that we can engage people and connect them with their communities to kind of combat these things, it felt that they would be good measures for looking at that. And there was an idea initially that there would be this questionnaire around well-being at the start, and then 3 months in there would be another one to kind of track where people were. And then alongside that was also this demographic questionnaire component. And that demographic questionnaire included things around kind of your standard questions to do with location and age and gender and ethnic group. But then we also had some more specific questions that were more targeted to the groups that we were looking to engage with. And that was around chronic illness, disability, living alone and caring responsibilities, as those were factors that were known to influence individuals' experiences of isolation. So we prepared some questionnaires that are available in paper format in a format that groups could print out and present to people so they could fill them in sessions, and also online. But it became quite apparent quite early on that the wellbeing measures weren't really working. So the Warwick-Edinburgh is a well-known, is an accepted scale. It's used widely across a number of programs. But really what we were looking at here, it wasn't a clinical pathway. It wasn't some sort of, I guess, referral-based intervention that somebody was taking part in. It was really just choices that people had made about activities that they just were interested in taking part in. So we had open discussions with Oxfordshire County Council from the start, and we were able to influence changes to be made to those monitoring and evaluation requirements. So there was a removal of that wellbeing component. There was also, and I guess this is a good one to think about in terms of your own groups, the opportunity cost of that work too. We were really committed to this grant splash approach, where we would be giving this community development support alongside the funding, but a lot of administration time was going into administering that evaluation and monitoring component of that wellbeing information. So we were really then trying to look at something that was more realistic and achievable for everybody involved. So for the groups, which were many of them completely run by volunteers, us as the organisation in the middle, with 2 days a week running, coordinating the programme, and then also realistic in terms of what the county council would receive kind of from this and what they could learn from it. So we went back, looked at the aims of the programme and said, well, what is this all about? This is about creating these opportunities for older people to do things that are meaningful for them. So we worked more closely with the groups. We kind of opened it up so that groups could really get back to us in the way that they felt was more meaningful. And we ended up producing a end of programme report that, although it featured the demographic information in terms of the measures, the data that I've already described, we presented that in a series of graphs. We also then had these page profiles, which was a standard kind of format of a page, which had the group's name, their logo, some photos of people engaged at the event, and then the rest of a couple of bullet points about the funding that they'd received and what the funding went towards. And then the rest of the page was dedicated to quotes that were either directly from attendees or participants in the activity, or the organisers of the activity, or volunteers who also had their own input and their own stories to share about the activities and what it meant to them. So we presented that report, and we were really keen that we wanted that to really bring to life. And that was a phrase that was actually mentioned in the breakout room that I was in. And we really felt that that was a key part of our role as the kind of infrastructure in the middle between the small grassroots organisations out delivering the work, and the county council as the funder, to really bring it to life to them, kind of what the Oxfordshire Way could mean and what is kind of contributing towards that out in people's neighbourhoods. So that report was really well received. The vibrant illustrations were really really valued, and I think it really did provide a meaningful illustration of the activity that was happening and what that meant to people personally. So also, being as this is a Grants Plus programme, we were keen that that end of programme report wasn't the end of the programme, and that we're continuing to engage with groups, we're continuing to arrange visits where we can and really celebrate the achievements and the outcomes, what those groups are achieving through their activities. So the Connected Communities Fund has been recommissioned for a second year. So we're really, as Laura mentioned, really keen not to move the goalposts with this programme. And we were really really intent on putting as much time and effort we could before we launched the programme to have a clear set of measures, so that we could go out to groups and we could say, these are the monitoring and evaluation requirements of this piece of funding, and this is how we can support you with this piece of work. So what we did for this round was we produced a document which was a welcome document, but also kind of set the expectations so that everybody, the groups, the participants attending those activities, us as the infrastructure organisations and the county council really had a kind of a clear idea of what we were going for in terms of the data that we were going to collect from this piece of work, and also how that was meaningful for us. So in terms of the well-being component for this piece of work, we're really allowing that to be very flexible. So we have got a series of questionnaires and a series of questions that have been suggested by the Oxfordshire County Council, and we've asked groups to kind of consider those. What's meaningful to your activity? What do you think is a good measure? And if you can think of another creative way that you really think would demonstrate the impact of your work more, then please share that with us. We're really keen to kind of allow groups to have that creativity to really capture that. So it has really been very much a learning exercise. In terms of the projects, they've been short term. Each time they have been 1 year programmes. And obviously the Oxfordshire Way, in terms of the vision, that is a longer term aspiration. It's a longer term vision. It's a whole system approach to really transforming how people live within their communities. So although we can do so much within this programme, I think it's really just about being, as we say, realistic, but also not, I guess, just making sure that we really do capture how influential and the impact that those small, seemingly small activities can have on people's day-to-day lives. So I think that really has been kind of the key learning for me through this piece of work.
Great, thank you, Vicky. That's really useful to know that different perspective and to see how you adapted things as you went on. Do you mind if you stop sharing just for a second? So I can go back to seeing everyone. Perfect, thank you. Any questions for Vicky? Sam, do you have a question?
Sorry, apologies for the lack of video. I was interested in the page profile format that you described for each of the activities, because it felt like it brought some sort of standardization to reporting back on a wide variety of different activities, but kind of keeping that standardized view. Is that a format or a structure that you'd be willing to share? Because I think that's something I can certainly see that being applicable to the different activities that we run, even though they're very, very different to the project you've described.
Yeah, so our report is available on the website, so I can share the link with Jo, and she can share it afterwards. So that report's available. And I guess that's another good thing I think about reporting impact is we've shared that report with the groups, and the feedback we've received from them has been really positive. So they've come back and they've said that they've learned about other groups that they didn't know existed, and they can see kind of how their work complements each other. And I think that's kind of another, I guess, slightly unanticipated benefit of really bringing those stories to life. So it was really nice to receive that feedback too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Any other questions for Vicky? Just a word for those of you who are from a CAG, then we have activity logs that we ask for CAGs to complete for us, so that we can collect data. Much of that is, having listened to Jane's presentation, is at the level 1 and 2 kind of end of the spectrum. But we collect, most of you will hopefully be familiar with them, but data on sort of numbers of people at events, things like volunteer hours, weights of various, depending on what theme you're working in, but weights of things that you've repaired or recycled or what have you. But then also some more qualitative data on sort of challenges, successes, your communications, things like that. And that data is very, really useful to us. So it helps us, like we've said, through that through cycle, it helps us to develop like our themes, to decide where we might want to distribute funding. Like this year, for instance, on the next 3 years, one of our themes is nature. So that's very much come from sort of changes in direction of the community groups and us seeing more people working in that area and directing more of our funds towards that. And also we very much go back to that data, so it feeds into our annual report, and then we are using that data when we're applying for funding as well to demonstrate the impact of the CAG network as a whole. And another benefit of it is it just amazes us, like the amount, when you put all the community groups' efforts together, then it's a phenomenal amount of work that's happening in the space. So it's really inspiring and motivating to sort of see it all captured as well. So that's just a plug for please fill in your activity logs, which we will be asking for next April-May time, now that our year runs from until the end of March. And if you have any questions about that, give me a shout. Any other questions? Otherwise, I might in view of this being all about monitoring and evaluation, I might ask you to pop in the chat as you're leaving, wishing you all a good night, but pop in the chat a word for describing how you feel about measuring your impact now, and perhaps your first next step that you'll take on your monitoring and evaluation journey, or something that your top tip from this evening, something around those, if you would like to do that. And meanwhile, a massive thank you to both Jane and Vicky for your presentations. And we will share the slides with permissions, hopefully after the event, and also the video if anyone wants to catch up or recap on anything. So Joe's off to find some jam jars and feeling inspired, which is fantastic. Sam, inspired and feeling positive and taking away micro stories. Yeah, CAG, we turn stories into case studies and things like that, for which again really brings the person impact to life of what we're doing. Kath, not being good at measuring over the years, we'll try harder and use some of the ideas. Fantastic, Kath. Anne's feeling better informed and motivated and planning to keep an activity log. Fantastic. Thanks, Anne. Vicky's feeling motivated. Catherine, semi-confident and planning to combine different types of tools. Sarah, keep it simple and inspiring. Kathy's feeling much better. Great. Lisa had already said it was interesting and thought-provoking, and Rianne had to drop out a bit early, but was saying it was inspiring. So thank you, everyone. I think that's most people having put something in the chat, so thank you for that. And yeah, I hope to see you all at a future session. So we have got a session coming in December as part of our Fresh Thinking series, and that is going to be really around women's health, but tagged as from menstruation to menopause and everything in between. So hope to see some of your faces there. That's on the 13th of December, but the publicity around that will be coming out very soon. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks all. Thanks to the presenters too.
Thank you
very
everyone.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.